Hi, this is Ramon from the Thinking Scrubs, and we are here with our second episode for the faction orientation for new players. So, in these episodes, basically, what we do is we break down one of the game's seven factions. We pick apart what makes them good, what makes them bad, and what makes them great options for new players looking to get into the game. So, with me today is Paulo Garces, and we're here to talk about the Resistance faction. The good guys, and when it comes to the sequel movie. So, Pao, if you could introduce yourself.
Okay, hi everyone. Good morning. My name is Paulo Garces. I've been playing X-Wing since Wave 3, I think. I'm one of the persons that Obi Parkon. I believe he's patient zero for X-Wing in the Philippines. He taught it to me, and then I taught it to all the other veterans. So I've been playing X-Wing for a while. Not a great player, but I just I'm average more or less, but I got lots of X-Wing. And I've been playing Rebellion, and since the split of the Resistance from the Rebellion in version 2, I've been playing the Resistance extensively.
Okay. So, Pao, what's your history with the Resistance faction? Could you give a little more background on that?
Okay, with the Resistance faction, I've been when I first tried the Resistance faction for version 2, the first thing that stuck to my mind was Poe Dameron because it's one of the few ships that can double action with stress, which is the old school push the limit card, which was it's a card that got abused a lot because it's really good. So I tried playing Poe Dameron with other aces, Poe Dameron with the Resistance Bomber, since I got a feeling that the meta was pushing everyone to more ships. So kind of figured that bombs are the way to go. Sadly, my prediction was wrong. So currently, I've been playing um, Resistance Beef, Resistance Efficiency, which is basically four ships with the most amount of mods I can fit, which is not it's just not foreign territory for me because I've been playing beef lists since version 1, and which is also why I have a phobia of facing ace lists because those things are scary back in version 1. Now they're not as scary, but the they're still a pain to fight in version 2, but uh, they're not as overpowered as they were before with token stacking and double reposition isn't as easy as to come by as before. So yeah, I've been for the past few months I've been focusing myself on resistance beef.
Okay. Yeah, Resistance Beef is it's a new hotness in the past wave when Wave 4 entered the game. So before we actually get deeper into what Resistance Beef does, what it actually is, can you give us a background of what the Resistance faction is? I mean, are these guys just rebels, but 30 years in the future, right? I mean, what
Uh,
makes it different?
okay, I well, my knowledge is based on what I've understood the movies to be. I've never read the books. I hear they're terrible. I'm sad to say, but from what, yeah,
Chuck
yeah,
Wendig.
yeah. Have you read it?
Some of them, but not all of them. They're
Yeah,
alright.
according to yeah, I've heard podcasts say that the first book is terrible, but after that it gets better. So I might try it someday once I get rid of my reading backlog. Anyway, so
Mhm.
from what I understand, the Resistance are born from the veterans of the old Grand Alliance from the original trilogy movies. They were assembled by Senator Leia Organa as a private military group against the rise of the First Order, which was being treated by the New Republic as not a threat, and Leia sees differently. So She gathered her old contacts and they tried recruiting heavily from worlds that are being oppressed by the First Order. So they're kind of like the rebellion from the first trilogy, only a different flavor. It's still an underdog faction that's fighting a behemoth that they can't face head up, so they have to resort to guerrilla tactics. The only difference I could tell is that unlike the original rebellion, the resistance is much more organized since you have veterans from the rebellion leading them, and you have access to technologies that the original rebellion did have. Since the original rebels, they relied on technologies that the Empire wasn't willing to use, like the Y Wing, which was decommissioned. So they had to find old ships and make them usable again. So yeah, that's how I understand them.
Yeah, basically they were born out of Mon Mothma's decision to demilitarize the New Republic and treat a.
Mm.
There was actually a treaty between the Imperial Remnant factions and the New Republic that
Uh-huh.
were in armistice.
Mm-hmm.
So it was basically Leia Organa was warmongering, and then the Resistance is born. But she may have been
Okay.
warm for a reason. Because now we see the effects of the new movies, and I think you described pretty well what the Resistance is as a faction. It's like the Rebels, but a little bit more technologically advanced, which brings us to the faction strengths and weaknesses. So, Pao, can
Mm-hmm.
you take me through first your 3 points on the faction strengths?
Okay. So as the resistance, the barrier for entry is easier to get into the faction because there's only 6 ships that
Mm-hmm.
and they are all legal for hyperspace and extended. So training for a hyperspace list means you can train for an extended list as well. So that's which is one of the things I liked about it. I
Oh,
don't have to
sorry. Pao, just to double check. Is the Resistance Falcon also hyperspace legal?
resistance Falcon. I believe so. Yeah. As far as I know, all resistance ships are extended legal.
Okay. So, yep.
As far as I know from memory, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Something. Should I continue, or do you want to
Sure, sure.
expound?
Go ahead, Pao.
Okay. Okay. Continuing. Another point is that the ships and crew are primarily focused with helping the whole themselves rather, and a specific squad mate. It's one thing you noticed. With the rebellion, you have people giving out abilities to multiple people, like Wedge. Whereas with the resistance, the buffs, if they're not assigned to help one specific people, it's designed to help themselves. So it's it they're for me anyway. The ships are designed to make themselves stronger, not so that each ship is able to perform on its own without overly relying on a complicated combo like you would for Rebellion to make a really powerful efficiency team. And for the last strength, the ships are improved versions of Rebel Alliance ships paired with interesting support ships, just like the Rebellion would have the T-65 and the Resistance will have the T-70, right? 70?
Yep. Yes, the
Yeah,
T-70.
okay. Yeah, the T-70. So it's basically the same chassis, one more hull with built-in engine, built-in boost, as opposed to the T-65's built-in barrel roll. And I like that for the T-70, when the S-foil is closed, you are rewarded for being a really good player if you can land your shots in the bullseye arc, so that your shots, instead of being just 2 dice, is still 3. Although it's harder to pull up with longevity ships, but it's a small nudge to make the T-70 better. How about you? What do you think are old rebellion ships that the resistance just need plain better?
The RZ2 basically. It's not tougher, but like but basically the RZ2 is a more mobile A-wing. It's got the best dial in the game. It's got 3 blue banks and a complete 2 blues, and then all its traits are blues. It's not
Oh yeah.
hyper. Yeah, so it's got at least 8 or 9 blue maneuvers compared to the other A-Wings 6 or 7. Yeah, it's got 9 because the other A-Wing has 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 9. So 9, and then it's 11 blue maneuvers for the RZ2. It's a more mobile A-Wing, plus it has a better chance of putting damage on opponents because of its rotating arc front to back. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't necessarily mean it's a tougher version of the A-Wing, but it does more things than the Rebel A-Wing. Of course, this specific improvement comes at a cost. The T-70s, the RZ-2 A-Wings, they're all way more expensive than their Rebel counterparts. Which brings us to the faction's strengths and weaknesses. Weaknesses. So, Pao,
Oh, I'd like to add something else.
go ahead.
Something we forgot to slide is that the Resistance, along with the First Order, it's one of the two factions with access to the tech slot.
Yeah, so it's one of the
Resist-
two factions that can use tech upgrades, like prime thrusters, pattern analyzer, advanced optics.
Yeah, Advanced Optics.
Go
Yes.
into the whole theme about these ships being improved versions of Rebel ships, because the T-70 and the RZ-2 A-Wing have access to the tech slot, but the T-65 and the RZ-1 do not.
Mm-hmm. True.
Yeah, and this goes as well for the First Order, which is the only other faction with access to the tech slot. So if you're looking for some high-tech toys, the Resistance and the First Order, well, in their case, the Resistance has everything for you.
True. Okay. So, are we moving on to weaknesses?
Yeah, go ahead. Take me through your thoughts on the weaknesses, on the points on the weaknesses.
Okay. First, the first one, the ace options fly differently from other factions. It's, ever since I fought against aces in version 1 of the game, I've always wanted to fly a ship that has the toughness of an X-Wing, power and maneuverability of Sunterfell, which, would be really awesome, but would just be overpowered. So it makes sense why for Poe, he doesn't have the native turns, but there are ways around it. You could put an astromech to make it better. And what else? How about you, Ramon? From I remember, you've been playing a lot of RG2 A-Wings, right?
Um, it's alright. I've been playing them since they came out, but yeah, I've been playing some A-Wing play. Basically, I've also been playing a lot of triple resistance aces. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I actually think that it's not that their resistance aces options are worse. It's not that they're limited or that they don't have uh, good resistance ace options. Because if you look at the other factions, the other ace factions, you have the Imperials and the Republic at the moment. The Imperials are more the classic ace play that we expected from the first edition. When people talk about double repositioning aces with a lot of actions and high initiative, the Imperials basically, I would say this, exemplify that. They have access to Darth Vader, Sunterfell at 6/6, Initiative 6, and then their pick of a good Initiative 5 Pocket Ace. And not a lot of factions actually have access to that many repositioning ships at Initiative 6. The other one would be Scum. And in the future, coming soon with the TIE Baron, it's gonna be the First Order. They'd have access to 3 Initiative 6s in one faction. But even in those in the Scum faction, only a few of those actually are the small-based double action aces that we term as aces. So uh, in the Republic, they're also a lot closer to that classic definition of ace, but they do get access to some very particular strengths, namely access to good regen without hampering their capability for double repositioning. Resistance doesn't have that. What Resistance has, as you mentioned, is the tougher armor on their X-Wings, on the T-70s, uh, and the utility of their astromech slot, because um, putting an R2 astromech on a T-70 uh, is possible, but but regenning your shields and running away kind of denies the mobility of the T-70's dial. In some way, resistance aces actually are very mobile when it comes to close engagements. You have the pattern rolls, access to tech like the pattern analyzer that lets you do red actions and red maneuvers and still keep taking actions. So
Mm-hmm.
um, which is why I'm saying that resistance ace options are fly differently because they don't rely on point fortressing regen. They also don't rely on fully simply how do you say this, outflying their opponents based on initiatives and double repositioning, because most of the time they'll be the ones moving first, especially if they don't have the bid. But they do get to rely on their technology, their amazing how to say this, their amazing ace abilities. For example, like Nyan Nam being able to ignore stress, Poe being one of the only pilots able to get their choice picks of second actions, push the limit style, like you said earlier. So it's these factors that make Resistance Aces a wholly different beast to fly. Unfortunately, for anyone looking for classic aces, they may not be as satisfying to fly because not every ship is able to double reposition, get the amount of efficiency that other aces usually have, nor have as flexible a dial as the TIE Interceptor or other similar ships like Delta 7. Plus, the in-faction similar ship to that, the A-Wing only has initiative going up to 5. So that's what makes it a weakness if you're looking for classic ace play, but a strength if you're looking for something different. So, any thoughts, pal?
I agree with you exactly because the first time I played Poker version 2, I tried flying him like Winterfell and I failed miserably. So I listened to some podcasts, and yeah, they mentioned that flying Poe like a classic ace just doesn't give you the same result. He has to be flown differently, and yeah, yeah. Yeah. Also, like me and normally, if you're an ace, you try to go for double reposition, stress yourself, and get it. But if you're if you're Nian Nam, you get harder, but your defense is lower. It's definitely a different flavor, and I've gotten used to it. It's just that I would love to play aces more because and my thoughts on how to play X-Wing basically expanded when I started playing from the other side of the table. Normally, I'm this beefy list that's chasing down an ace, and then when I started playing as an ace, by the way I how to play the game became different. It just so happens that I found a really good beefy resistance list, and I'd like to stick with something I'm good at, but definitely going to play some more resistant aces in the future.
Okay. So, Pao, can you take us now to your second point? I think this is related to how the ship and crew card abilities, how to say it, are designed. So, if you're a player,
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
okay. So, unlike the Rebellion, the resistant ships buff themselves or one other player. They are not like they don't have options for buffing the entire team like Wedge. I know, so not Wedge, like Biggs being able to siphon off some of the damage to himself. Not like Magvayaro, not like Saw Gerrera. They buff the entire team, and yeah, it's something that the resistance just doesn't have. Well, the resistance will most likely buff one other, someone else, like the new Leia. which decreases the difficulty of a ship's move anywhere on the map, which is amazing because there's not a lot of abilities in the game at its current state that is technically limitless or no range limit. So
Spout,
there.
then there's Supreme Leader Snoke.
Oh, right, all right. Yeah, but it's Supreme Leader Snoke is with the First Order, and just like how the Resistance is a slightly more selfish and better version of the Rebellion, I think the First Order is also like that. But yeah, so as a Resistance, instead of like the a very synergistic team, the Resistance, I'd like to think is composed of heroes in each and every ship.
Okay. And in that statement as well, there's along with this is there's a lack of ways to how would I say this put negative effects on your enemy ships. There's not a lot of control elements in the resistance faction. Well, as
Mm,
you're sticking tractor beams or jamming beams on your T-70s and transports, there's not really a lot of ways to how would I say this control the status of your current enemies. Aside from that, well, they do have access to bombs, but and ordnance. But like for example, they don't have an ordnance carrier that can carry diamond boron missiles. So
ouch.
that's something that they're locked out of those control options right there. So yeah, basically it's a weakness because when you're up against the control list, you really have to rely on the faction strengths of not being pulled into your enemy's control plans and shenanigans. You need to be able to know when you have to take the debuff and then know how to recover from that in the next coming turns. So yeah, no team buffs, lack of enemy debuff options, and now we're at our third point: limited force and ordnance-based playstyles. Pao, you'd like to introduce that?
Okay. When we say limited force, as of now, the only force user, the pilot force user anyway for the Resistance is Rey, and her ability is amazing. Using the force to guarantee a hit or an evade, provided it's happening in the front, is amazing. I really love that ability. It's just that I do not like her chassis, which is something we'll talk about in the next point. But moving on from that, there's a lack of ordnance-based playstyles, like you mentioned before. The only ship that can carry an ordnance for the resistance is the Star Fortress. Uh, it's great. I mean, it has access to the trajectory simulator, and that it's still a powerful ability. And the Star Fortress isn't something that's to be trifled with. It's got 270-degree arc. It can drop bombs way out in front or in the back, so it's practically 360. But it's the only ship that can do it. And there are scenarios where I wish I had a small tiny ship that could just drop a bomb like a Y wing, just to give me more versatility.
But yeah, there is that. For example, um, also in addition to that, the T-70s at their price point, they're not really good proton torpedo carriers. They become way more expensive. So it's not really a good idea. It's not necessarily a good idea to keep carrying expensive ordnance on all these small base ships. Uh, that's not so. You rarely see lists that have three proton torpedoes on them, unlike in Republic or in the Rebel factions. So people who like blowing stuff up, there's only one place to go. It's the bomber, like Pao said. But too much Alpha Strike play going on with the resistance lists. There are some Alpha Strike options, but they're not as varied as in other factions, like in Rebels. Imperials have their very beautiful Alpha Strike options when it comes to the gunboats. and some other uh what's a good another good Alpha Strike faction. Um, well, Scum actually. The primary factions all have good Alpha Strike options, and I think this is all due to the fact that they have a more varied uh, number of ships currently in their stable, which is also which is also related to the fact that the Resistance faction, along with the First Order faction, is one of the few factions with only one Force user.
Ooh, didn't know that one.
You that was actually part of your notes.
Oh, okay. Oh man, it's been from birth, so a bit about, but thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, that was part of your notes. You mentioned that like in the Resistance faction, they only have Ray as their primary force
Mhm.
pilot, and then in First Order, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only force pilot I know in the First Order is Kylo Ren.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense, thematically, since
Yeah,
the trilogy, the sequel trilogy movies are focusing on those two. It just kind of dilutes the story if there are other people who could use the force.
yes,
I think they're going an interesting story in an interesting path in the stories anyway.
yeah. And this is a weakness definitely for players who love the Force, who like Jedi, who like pilots who use the Force to do amazing things like Anakin Skywalker. But for me, for me, a Star Wars fan who has never really liked Jedi, this is great. I love it. uh, how about you, pal?
What exactly really touched me?
For me, for me, it's not necessarily a bad thing that there's only one Force user, or Force
Mm-hmm.
playstats are limited. It is a challenge because that's what makes Jedi Aces in the Republic really great, the Force. But
Mm-hmm.
me, I've always preferred the Starfighter jockeys compared to the Jedi Knights. I've always preferred thematically, pilots and squadrons, Rogue Squadron, compared to like stories about Jedi, personally. So
Yeah, I
it's a feature rather than a weakness.
Yeah, I can see the appeal for that because it's easier to relate to people who are they're just normal folks. They're put in tough situations and they manage to pull through. As an audience, as someone who's listening to the story, those are the people who you put yourselves into the story because it's just Jedi. You know, in in your heart of hearts, you're never gonna have the force. So yeah, it's just easier to imagine you're one of these pilots, and I'd like to think that
I'd like to think
if
about
I,
it as they're actually more badass when they pull off something great, what Jedi can't do without the Force.
yeah, yeah, like
Like,
Poe Dameron, right?
yeah,
Not
like Dammer, Initiative 6 with 2 actions a turn.
yeah,
Oops. Uh,
and
sorry, go ahead, pal.
I don't know, yeah, yeah. Just the last point I'd like to say is I don't think it's like you said, it's a feature, not a bug, that the resistance in the first order only have an access to one force using pilot because they need to have their own flavor profile. I mean, if everyone had force users, then they're no longer special. So
Mm-hmm.
I, I don't begrudge as much that the Republic has a ton of access to force users because it just makes sense plot wise.
Yeah,
It's a Jedi Order.
yeah, and in their era, Force users are like a dime a dozen. So thematically, it makes sense. Balance wise, it is a strong mechanic. It's not something that's overpowering the game. So I think it's really nice how that's segregated from current faction right now. Well, crew like Leia, for example,
Mhm.
does give nice options, but I like options more than something overriding this part of the faction identity.
Okay, should we move on to the last point?
Let's move on to the last. For any fans of the Falcon, even if you're a fan of the movies, this faction is the worst Millennium Falcon. Got the worst YT-1300. Compared to the Scum versions, the one that was featured in the solo movie, and the Rebel, the classic
Mhm.
Rebel Millennium Falcon. Rebel Millennium Falcon is the best, and we're talking about this from a dial, the maneuver dial perspective, and the point cost perspective. So it's just a heads up. We're not saying the Resistance Falcon is unplayable, but we are saying that if you get jealous with other factions' toys, and then you look at your Falcon, and then you look at the Rebel Falcon, you're gonna feel really inadequate.
Yeah. You yeah, like I was pointing out earlier, Ray's ability is amazing. It's just that she does not have as much hit points as the other Falcons. Her dial's a
Definitely.
bit worse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it was just equal to the Rebel Falcon, I'd be playing Ray all day. But it's not meant to be.
Oh, have you ever tried the whole jousting Ray archetype that we tried playing around with before, pal? The one where she
Was that
flies
the
in the Jess Fava?
Oh yeah, was that the Bully Squad, the one where where I'm gonna plug your video with Tim? Yeah, you were pitching Ray as a pilot in a previous episode. I think it was called Ship It. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Thinking
Ex-
Scrubs Stupid episode. Have you been able to try that specific archetype? It'd be nice to hear your thoughts on that sometime.
Oh, not yet, not yet. But yeah, it sounds great. I mean, it's pretty efficient for the points, and I really should get into trying that. I just didn't focus on Rebel Beef. I'm sorry, but
No, it's okay. It's
I
not a
think the
problem.
list has merit.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
think the list.
let's talk about it in a different episode. But try checking that out because you mentioned that you wanted to fly Ray every day if you can. Why not checking that out? Try it out. Tell us what you think. It's got the same amount of health as current resistance beef. So the only thing missing is an extra 3 at red attack die. Okay. So
Okay.
with strengths and weaknesses, more or less, we've got a very individualistic faction. We've got a faction that when they help each other out, they help each other out in a very limited fashion, but they play very differently from how the other main factions do teamwork, mobility, and ace play, right? And you've got better ships than rebels, so who doesn't want better ships? um,
Of
so
course.
why should you pick this faction? If you're a new player, why Resistance? Why not just play Rebels? Aside, I mean, they're more expensive. I mean, Resistance ships are more expensive. They have fewer ships. Why pick Resistance? Pao?
Okay. If you're a new player and you're trying to jump into the game, why would you pick the Resistance? Yeah, like what we've been harping on since the start of the show. Uh, if you like the sequel trilogy, and I know it's a very divided fandom right now, but if you like the sequel trilogy protagonist specifically, yeah, you should definitely give them a try, especially Ray. I think her car pilot mechanics represent her ability in the story accurately. She's pretty powerful.
Yep.
And
Go ahead, Pao.
okay, and then for the second point, mobility, teamwork, and small teams are your thing. This is something that the resistance doesn't have, which is swarms. The resistance will have access to a wing swarm, 5 or 6 A-wing, but they don't have access to a true swarm, which is 8 ships. Now, it's very powerful, but if you're gonna play more than 3 rounds in a day, especially in a tournament, that's gonna drain your brain. I tried playing swarms as a rebellion before, and that just gave me migraines for for the rest of the day, and it was horrible. So I think I could, if I practice more, I'd build the endurance for it, but it just doesn't reward the rebels for swarm play, so I stopped. And there, uh, the resistance has really good 2 to 4 ship lists,
Mm-hmm.
and it's designed that way. they have good synergy, and the points will match exactly just that. So small elite teams, if then you may want to pick the resistance.
Great.
Another, yeah. Do you want to expound on that, Ramon, or would you like me to continue?
No, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so okay, I'll just barrel on right through.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
for the third point, you have access to consistent attacks, which means, as we've said before, the resistance, most of their buffs, they help each other. So, for example, would be just Pava. Her ability is she gets rerolls based on the number of friendly ships of range one. So all you have to do most of the time is stay focused and just make sure there's someone by your side. So you could reroll and then focus your attack if you
Mm-hmm.
want to go all out. So you have a more consistent attack with
Mm-hmm.
just three dice. And there are other ships with access to that,
Bastion.
like what I have Bastion exactly. So just deals the damage. If there's a ship that gets a damage card at range 1 to 2, Bastion gets a free target lock. Another ship is Snap Wexley with Composure. Have you tried that, Ramon?
Yeah. It's actually the how to say this. The resistance beef that you're playing now, its predecessor was actually Snap, Jess, Bastion, and Lulo.
Oh, okay.
That
Oh,
was the
something else. Okay, I
so
like
when
that. It's faster.
yeah, unfortunately, Lulo doesn't fit anymore. It's a full 200 points with a naked Lulo. So Finn definitely is the more efficient choice in the current meta.
Yeah, that's true. And just to continue on the point, when we said there's a line here that says time on target,
Yes.
we are specifically talking about Hugo and the RZ2A wings because
No,
not only
not
are these ships amazingly agile, they can shoot
yeah.
backwards. So you could pretty much do whatever kind of action you want and then
Mhm.
shoot backwards at the same time. It just
Yes.
opens up your dial.
Yep. Just to add to that, Pao. Sorry, when I said earlier,
Yeah.
not specifically just the RZ2A wings, because time on target, you're talking about aces like Elo and Nien, who have access to white talon rolls or doing red maneuvers without getting stressed. You've got the resistance transport with access to reverses, and ships like Covanel, who get buffed doing those maneuvers, like red maneuvers, reversing one bank and everything. Like the faction, you've got the bomber that can double tap, throw a bomb in just one third, and then stop dead right in front of the enemy. This faction was built to maximize the amount of times they shoot at the enemy. It's in all their ships, aside from the resistance pod, which has the worst dial in the game.
I know. I know.
In the game, so that probably belongs to the jump master, but it's probably the worst worst dial in the faction.
Yeah, I know, but it's cheap, so
Yeah.
it's made up for.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely
and to build up on
overpaid.
your point.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, to build up on your point, the resistance also access to Leia Organa, so she can make the red maneuvers as white, so it's more time on target.
Yeah, and the amazing if you turn whites into blues and you get into a good spot, it's about getting into the great spots even if you're moving first. That's what we mean by mobility, consistent attacks when we talk about the resistance faction. And all of these helps to all of these come together to help you if you're in a competitive how to say this mood. All of these things actually help you minimize tournament fatigue. Pao, this is your fourth point. Can you talk about maybe an experience that's similar to this? Aside from your earlier example about trying out Rebel Swarms in the past.
No, that's just it. I tried eight Z95s before, and it's fun. You could really jam up there and cause heads on the board. It's fun, but I just when you play a lot of shit,
most of the time your brain is just going to be on autopilot. You're just, I'm just trying to make sure my ships are not bumping and hopefully someone will be in my arc. Whereas if you're playing an elite list that's you have enough brain power left, you have enough juice left to think of steps in advance. Just like playing chess with thinking multiple steps in advance. It's more interesting that way. There's more space in your RAM for head simulations on what future moves would be, and I think it's a better play as opposed to just marching my ship forward, hopefully kill something to attrition. Which is why, yeah, I like the resistance for that kind of play.
Okay, great. So let's move on to what are some ships that new players can start with. So, Pao, you chose the initial three, right? The initial three, because when I was
Yes.
fixing the
Mhm.
slides, I only saw three. So, can you go through your thoughts on the three before I take a gander at them?
Okay, sure. The first and foremost, if you're going to look at resistance, I highly recommend looking at the T70s because for this faction, they will be your workhorse. They will go for most ships and do what they're designed to do. They're tough, they get hard, and they can go slow if they need to. They can go a bit faster, and the thing is, they're also better than their Rebellion counterparts, the T65, which is what I described earlier. More hull, better S-foil abilities, access to tech slots, really great pilots like Poe Dameron. So, and and it's not just aces. My current list that I've been using, I have three T70s and one pod, which which speaks volumes to how tough and resilient these ships are. They hit hard, and they can take a lot as well. That extra half point, it's a big deal. With the previous swings, the T65s in the Rebellion, you take 3 damage, you're giving away half points. With the T70s, they need to give you 4 damage to go to half. And most, from experience, it's just one more round of shooting that your opponent has to waste just to make sure they kill your ship, unlike the old T65s. Which is why, yeah, if you're gonna build a ship, build with the T70 in mind first. How about you, Ramon?
The T70s? Yeah, more or less. I
Yeah.
definitely agree with you. The T70s are the faction's workhorse. If you're building a list for the resistance faction, it's rare that you how would you say this? It's rare that you don't include at least one T70. There are lists that don't, but we're gonna be talking about them later. The last slide.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Mhm.
definitely solid three attack dice and a slew of consistent shooters in the lower initiative with Jess and Bastion.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to the RC2A wings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There. Like what we've been harping before, they are just plainly better than their old Rebellion counterparts. The dial is amazing. As far as I remember correctly, there's literally more blue movements than if you combine the whites and the reds. I think it's bonkers. You can
Mm-hmm.
pretty much do whatever you want, and you combine that with the ability to shoot backwards. Oh man, you'll be if you're playing it right, you should be shooting an enemy every turn. So yeah, it's it's going to spoil you. That movement dial is going to spoil you. But the thing is, it only has two calls into the shield, so it's definitely an ace ship. So if you can't fit a T70, it definitely bears in mind to look into squeezing in an RZ82 with upgrades instead, like Heroic and Advanced Optics. How about you, Ramon? I last time we talked, I think you were also looking at playing 5A wings.
Yeah, I've actually had a few reps already with the 5 A list. So with the 5RZ A2 A wing list specifically.
Mhm.
So I've been exploring it. It's fun. It definitely flies differently from 5 RZ1 A-Wings. There's a lot of consistency in dice attacks. But there's also the possibility of not flying them like a mini swarm. There is the possibility of playing a smaller trio of A-Wings paired with your 1 or 2 pocket aces. So that's a possibility to fly the RZ2s that way. What I really like about RZ2s paired with the high initiative P70s is that they're actually pretty good anti-ace deck. We mentioned earlier that one of the issues of the Resistance faction is that they don't have access to the high initiative playstyles of factions like the Scum or the Empire. They can get 665 or 666 in one list in terms of initiative. But the fact that they have a high emphasis on time on target means it's actually easy to set up kill boxes. Whether you're flying the A-Wing Swarm, you're flying an A-Wing in the list paired with any of the high initiative P70s, there is a way to deal with aces. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying how to say this. It's an auto win, but I'm saying that it is in faction tech based on the available chassis and pilot abilities that make dealing with aces probable. So being able to set up your kill boxes because you just take a 2 forward and then rotating your action with a focus is amazing. The RZA2 does that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So
Plus, we're only A-Wings with initiative 5s. The Rebel A-Wings are stuck until initiative 4, so that's great. I just wish there was an initiative 6 one. But I don't think that's gonna happen.
yeah, you never know. Ano, yeah, malay mo may dumating sa. You never know. More.
I don't think they're included in the hot shots.
Yeah, there are 2 RV2 A-Wing pilots there, so there is some hope. Especially with Von Reg coming out for the First Order. That guy is just disgusting.
Which one? Which one?
Oh, so yeah, in the Hot Shots and Aces pack, there's gonna be 2 RZ2 A-Wing pilots. Though we don't know they're to the 6, right? But I am hoping the First Order is getting an Initiative 6 pilot in the upcoming TIE Baron expansion. So yeah, if they're getting an Initiative 6, I hope the Resistance is getting an Initiative 6. If not, I'm hoping those 2 A-Wings in the box are both Initiative 5, and I'll fly 5 Initiative 5 ships. That'd be great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that'd be amazing. Okay, so should I move on to the transport in the pod?
Resistance transport in the pod.
Yeah. Okay, so this thing is the resistance transport. It's basically lore-wise, they're made from the chassis of the B-Wings. So they're tough, they move slow, but they're knife fighters. And what make it hits weaker with just 2 dice, unlike the Rebel B-Wings. But the thing that makes a transport amazing is the double crew slot and the crews that come with it. Like I'm sorry, I forgot their names, but
Corsella.
Yeah, Carcella, which is you get rid of all your stress. You just need to do 1-2 maneuver. There's the purple lady. What's her name? I'm sorry.
That's Amelin Holdo.
Yeah, Holdo, which is it's an amazing ability. There's no broken combo yet, but the opportunity is there to make something broken and just looking harder into it. The ability to swap good and bad tokens with another ship. You can absorb jam tokens, you can absorb stress, you can absorb strain, and then give them something else. Giving Ray reinforce, which I've done in a previous game with Val, I think.
Oh yeah, Pao, you remember he told you that's not legal because Ray is a large base ship.
Yeah, that's putting angle deflectors on Ray, but I found a way to by having Holdo in a different ship.
So the pod gives Holdo the reinforce. I mean,
Yes,
good.
and then she passes the ray.
Okay.
I, uh, yeah, the transport gets the reinforce and then passes into ray. You know, it
Right.
makes her a lot tougher.
But wouldn't it happen after Ray actually engages? Because Holdo is at you get to pass around tokens when the ship you're on engages. It's not at the start of the
Right,
game.
shoot. Yeah. It's only good if you're fighting lower initiative guys and the reinforce makes more sense.
Yeah, if you're going up against a swarm, maybe that's pretty great tech. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. hmm
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, with the transport, there's a lot of shenanigans you can do. There's some very interesting crews that can do abilities only available to the resistance, like being able to do actions while you're stressed and etc. And then the next one is the pod, which we've been alluding earlier with Finn. The pods, they're cheap. They're the head of the transport. They're cheap. Their movement dials are horrible, but that's the thing. They're cheap and their pilot abilities are amazing. So it kind of balances out. You have really amazing pilot abilities and cheap ship, but it's it's just so much worse. It's very predictable if once you've played with it enough. So yeah, uh, but that's the star currently is Finn. Even with the FAQ with this ability, he's still pretty good. Taking strains for guaranteed dice
Yeah.
means
Go pal.
yeah. So,
I just
yeah,
agreed.
it's great value. You pair him with a perceptive co-pilot. You're basically guaranteeing an extra green and red dice every turn. It's great.
hmm Yeah.
How about your? Mm,
Just to add to that, Finn is as tough as a T70 for uh, I know a 20% discount even when fully loaded up. So that's crazy, just because of that. Even
yeah,
with when Pao mentioned, even with the recent clarifications on how strain works, even if Finn has to quote unquote defend uh, with a modified, a negatively modified uh, defense during an attack. If he's shooting last, or if he takes the strain during the last shot, next turn he just has to take a blue maneuver, and it's gone. So it's not really that big of a deal. It does make him more predictable,
yeah,
but
yeah. You could do a red maneuver, which has a lot, and
yeah.
just do a blue maneuver. You lose the strain and the stress, so it's great.
Yeah. I just also want to point out that propensity for abuse in Resistance crew is actually there. Like, if you mentioned, you mentioned Amelin Holdo. On my end, one of the
hmm
crew members that I actually enjoy in Resistance is Corusella, the one that removes all the stress. Did you know you can actually go through a debris field and then remove all the stress with Corusella on board?
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah, it's crazy.
it turns any Corusella carrier into some sort of like Dash archetype. Dash in the Outrider for Rebels equivalent.
Yeah.
So
Another
just sorry.
another for transport is the first time I saw the transport, I forgot the pilot name. Maybe you could help me out. Um, he's the pilot after Govanel in Initiative. Uh,
So is it
if
Pam Never Good? And she's a girl if that's her.
oh girl, yeah. So yeah, you another card. But basically, the idea is you keep doing red. You keep doing. You
Red maneuvers.
coordinate. You get calculate. But oh man, I forgot the exact combo. But what's the ship's name again? I'm sorry.
Pamich Narrow Good.
Yeah, Pavich. Yeah, Pavich Narrow Good. Yeah, with Corsella and a droid, and then yeah, I would put C3PO, and then another droid on a ship that you carry. So basically, you can coordinate across the board, outside of range two. You get a free calculate, you get a free action, and then you just need to do a blue maneuver, get rid of all that's the double stress of accumulated. It's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that does sound interesting. Okay, and one thing that we'd like to emphasize regarding these three choices for ships to start with, these three ships are the ships with second edition blisters. You guys can just drop down to your friendly local gaming store, pick up a blister for an RZ2 A-Wing, a T-70, or Resistance Transport with the pod, and it won't be a problem. Because the two other ships in the faction, the Resistance Bomber and the Millennium Falcon, they're yet to be re-released. They were originally released in the first edition. So right now, if you want to play those ships, you're gonna have to grab the Resistance Conversion Kit, and you have to find the first edition models if you don't already own them. So if you're starting out, you're a new player, this is your first time playing X-Wing, these three ships are great to start out with because there are actually a couple of lists that you can try out just with these three options. So you want to move on to the next slide, pal? Or anything to add to?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So list recommendations. These ones I just listed them down. There's Jess and 3 Red Squadron pilots. That's just you buying four blisters of X-Wings, X-Wing T-70s. There's, as we already talked about earlier, the Jess, Snap, Bastion, and Finn list. So that's 3 T-70s and then a Resistance Transport and Pod blister. So that's just one blister all in all. There are options for triple resistance aces. You could go Po, Lulo, and Nien, Po, Tali, and Nien, or go all 3 T-70s with Po, Elo, and Nien. And they're pretty much valid options. They may differ in performance, but if you want to keep your ship count down and you like small base ships, maybe that's an archetype that you can explore. And there's Po and 3 A-Wings. You take a T-70 you grab 3 A-Wings just to help Po out, screen for him, like block the enemies if they're all higher initiative or they're moving last. So those are all fun lists, and you don't need to grab the conversion kit. But there are 3 other lists here that are also of interest, like the 2-ship list of Han and Po, or there is a version that's Po and Rey together. So very thematic list. There's also Rey plus friends, Rey with A-Wings, or Rey with T-70s, or Rey with Han, double YT-1300s. And then there's Chewie plus the A-Wings or pods. But all of these, since they require the Millennium Falcon, all of them will require the Resistance Conversion Kit. But there are definitely options for anyone interested in the Resistance faction. Any thoughts, Pao, on some other list recommendations? Hello, Pao?
Oh, sorry. Other list recommendations. Personally, I've tried the Bomber. It's pretty good. When the Resistance first came out, I tried the Bomber with Po and Lulo.
Yes,
and
that
it
was the first I was using then.
Yeah, that was memorable. I had a very intense game with Val, where for the entire game we just played 5 rounds because we were head singing so much, and it was fun. And the thing with that list is you have to, the mindset is different, whereas with most lists you just try and kill ships. Playing a bomber with 2 aces, it's akin to playing as an ace list, in the sense that you're trying to get points and not take as much points as possible. It's a bit hard with a big, slow, hulking ship, but it's interesting. So I would recommend looking into the bombers as well. Just, it's one of the few ships that has access to be able to shoot front and the sides and then drop a bomb at the back. So it's practically 360. It's
Mhm.
it's pretty good value, and if you pair it with the right crews, you could double tap.
Yep.
So yeah, the only downside though is, as Ramon has pointed out, is you well, one, bombers, they're hard to find, even more so than Falcons from my experience. And
Mm.
yeah, you need a conversion kit, so that's just more cost. If you're not in a hurry, I highly recommend the recommendations posted by Ramon with the three initial ships, the T-70, the RZA-2, and the Resistance Transport and Pod. Just those three ships, uh, you can feel highly competitive lists with just those three.
Yep. So, Pao, anything left to add for our viewers, for anyone interested in the Resistance faction? Anything you'd like
Hmm.
to that you may have missed?
Anything we may have missed? Uh, Personally, for the meta, currently it's Republic and Rebels and Imperials. And currently the Separatists that are doing really well, and it's fine with me. Every now and then on some major tournaments, the Resistance pushes in, and that's because I believe there's not a lot of people that's playing the Resistance enough. I believe in the potential for this faction so much. That's why I've been playing it. Only it, even though I have a more extensive Rebel collection, I believe that we just someone just has to find that the the really broken thing and run with it, and the resistance is gonna go places. But right now, unfortunately, the faction is very balanced, so there's not a lot of ship combinations that are broken. But just like with the other factions that people have been saying that, oh no, that faction is poop because they don't have cheap ships that are very cost effective. A lot of people are saying that about Scum, and if you look at tournaments now, Scum is coming out with just unique pilot combinations that are knocking other ships out of the park. And I believe the Resistance is going to do the same thing.
Mhm.
Whereas the Scum would be more with messing with other players. The Resistance is just going to be giving themselves that much needed extra juice to make themselves better. And if that's something that interests you as much as it interests me, I'd like you to join me with this faction, and we can talk a long while on what possible broken fix there could be.
Great. Okay, so viewers, if you like mobility, teamwork, and small elite teams, the Resistance is probably something you might want to check out. If you love A-Wings, definitely the faction to be in right now. Not saying RZ1s are bad, they're pretty good, but any RZ2s are just, they look pretty sexy. So, yeah, thank you so much for being with us today, pal. So glad to have you on board here and talking about the Resistance faction. I hope our listeners were able to learn something new, or have had their creativities stroked, and probably jump into the Resistance. And I look forward to more Resistance players on board. So, uh, with nothing else left to say, I guess this is us signing off. Bye.
Bye bye, everyone.